What if I told you that reality is trying to speak to you, but you've been trained to ignore it? Have you ever noticed how certain events seem to chase you down with surgical precision? As if the universe had its own language, and it was whispering something meant only for you. The same song playing 3 times in a single day. A number appearing on license plates, clocks, addresses, a person showing up just when you were thinking about them. At first glance, they seem like coincidences. But what if they aren't? The truth is, synchronicities aren't accidents. They are encoded messages from consciousness, signs that defy linear logic but carry a vibrational precision that can't be ignored. But here's the catch. Most people pass right through them without seeing, because we were conditioned not to feel, not to notice, to call coincidence what is actually a direct response to our energetic field. And here begins the breakdown of everything you were taught. What you call coincidence might actually be a mirror of your frequency. The real question isn't why this happens, but why you've only just begun to notice. There's something happening behind the scenes of your mind, and in this video, we're going to unearth that truth. A truth that could completely transform the way you see your life. And more than that, it might reveal that you were never truly alone. The universe has always responded. You were just looking the wrong way. Social conditioning and skepticism. You were born sensitive, connected. Before you learned to speak, you could already feel. The field around people, the vibration of a place, the presence of something greater, even without knowing what it was. Children have no filters. They know when something feels right or not. They know when someone is saying one thing and vibrating another. They haven't been programmed yet, but soon that sensitivity begins to be corrected. We were taught to trust logic more than intuition, to choose what is safe, realistic, proven, to measure life using external rulers as if the invisible were a delusion and the soul a distraction. In school, we learned to repeat, to memorize formulas, to suppress doubt and fake certainty. Science became dogma, intuition, a deviation. Modern society trained us to believe that anything which can't be touched, measured, or explained doesn't exist. And with that, something precious was lost. You stopped listening to the signs, stopped trusting the chills, the synchronicities, the inner voice that said, go this way. You began to doubt what you felt, to think it was exaggeration, fantasy, coincidence. And the more you tried to fit in, the further away you drifted from yourself. That's the effect of social conditioning. It doesn't destroy who you are, it makes you doubt it. The culture of skepticism didn't just settle in books. It took root in how you see the world. Today, you perceive the invisible and try to silence it. You feel a calling and rationalize it. You receive a sign and laugh inwardly, as if apologizing to reason. But it wasn't always like this. If you close your eyes now and recall your childhood, you might access subtle memories, that chill as you entered a room, the hunch that something was about to happen, and it did. The feeling of talking to someone invisible, of seeing shapes in the sky, of sensing there was more beyond the walls of your bedroom. That wasn't imagination, that was expanded perception. You were open, tuned in, whole, until they started shaping you. That's nonsense. That doesn't exist. You're seeing things. And little by little, you closed off. You learned to follow the safe path, to trust maps that were never drawn for your terrain. But reality, the one that vibrates, pulses, and responds, never stopped communicating. It just began speaking in silence, through patterns, repetitions, signs that transcend the control of the rational mind. And that's why, despite all skepticism, synchronicities keep happening. Because life is trying to remind you of something you already know, but forgot. It's not that synchronicities just started, it's that you've begun to see again. When the layers of old conditioning begin to fall, when the weight of living only through logic becomes too heavy, when the pain of feeling disconnected becomes unbearable, the soul finds space to emerge again. And in that instant, Everything that once seemed like coincidence starts to take on a new tone, a new rhythm, a new light. What was once ignored now pulses, and an inevitable question begins to echo inside. Why is this happening to me right now? That's the crack that opens, the gap where the mind no longer has control and consciousness begins to remember. Deep down, you always knew there was something more. You always felt that life was more than cause and effect. The question now is, what exactly are these synchronicities, and what are they trying to show you? In the next section, we'll explore the hidden nature of these signs and understand why they are far more than coincidences. They are cracks in the veil, invitations from reality for you to awaken. The nature of synchronicities. Carl Jung called it meaningful coincidence, a precise intersection between an external event and an internal state that carries deep meaning, but which can't be explained by common logic. Jung didn't see synchronicities as mystical in a fantasy sense. For him, they were real manifestations of the collective unconscious, signs that the human psyche and external reality are not separate. They only appear to be. Nikola Tesla said that, if you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And perhaps in this context, synchronicities are exactly that, meeting frequencies. Albert Einstein, though skeptical of many spiritual matters, acknowledged that time and space are persistent illusions, which opens the door for us to understand that what we call chance might simply be the interconnection of fields we can't see with our eyes, but feel with our awareness. Synchronicities are breaches. They are cracks in the Cartesian model of reality, a reminder that matter is not separate from mind, that the universe isn't a cold machine, but an interconnected consciousness. And when you start observing with more presence, those cracks multiply. Because synchronicity doesn't depend on luck, but on alignment. You begin to realize that everything has rhythm, everything has code, everything responds. A deep thought arises and is soon echoed in a song lyric, in someone who mentions exactly that, in a book that falls off the shelf with the answer you needed. It's not magic, it's a mirror. Synchronicity is a reflection of your vibrational frequency at the exact moment it occurs. And the more coherent you are inside, the more coherent the world becomes outside. But why do these events move us so deeply? Because they break logic, they rupture linearity, and in the instant that happens, something within you opens. The ego goes quiet, the mind can no longer explain, and what remains is presence. Synchronicity disarms. It pulls you out of autopilot, forces you to pause and feel, and in that moment you're no longer just existing, you're participating, present, aware, awake. It's as if the universe is saying, now you're hearing me. These signs are small windows into a new perception of reality. They remind you that there is an invisible field, and that this field is in constant dialogue with you. But be mindful, synchronicity is not superstition. It's not about seeing signs in everything. It's about recognizing that life isn't random when you're not living on autopilot. Spiritual maturity is needed to feel a synchronicity and not turn it into dependency or escapism. Because the sign is not the destination, it's only an invitation. You might see a repeating number, have an unlikely encounter, receive a message at the perfect time, but the true power lies in what you do with it. Synchronicity is not the final answer. It's the tap on the shoulder, the whisper before the crossing, and perhaps most importantly, it only manifests intensely when you are aligned in mind, emotion, and energy. When you're not forcing nor resisting, when you're present enough to notice and light enough to allow. Synchronicities then reveal something profound. The universe is responsive. It doesn't follow only physical laws. It dances with your consciousness. And if that's true, if reality responds to the way you vibrate, observe, and feel, then we need to take a closer look at this mechanism. Because behind the spiritual beauty of these signs, there's also a scientific foundation. In the next section, we'll explore how quantum physics, neuroscience, and spirituality intertwined to explain why reality changes when you observe, and why your internal vibration may be the key to collapsing synchronicities into the outer world. Science and spirituality. There is an experiment in quantum physics that changes everything we thought we knew about reality, the double-slit experiment. In this experiment, particles fired through two slits behave like waves, interfering with each other until someone observes them. When there is an observer, the particles change their behavior and start acting like matter, tracing defined paths. The simple act of observing changes the outcome. This is not a metaphor, it's physics. Consciousness influences the behavior of reality. For a long time, this experiment was treated as a curiosity of subatomic physics. But gradually, it became clear that the phenomenon isn't limited to the lab. It is subtly present in every human thought, choice, and vibration. That's where spirituality meets science. The idea that the universe responds to your vibration is no longer just a belief. Today, we know that the human brain filters millions of stimuli per second, and what regulates what enters or doesn't enter your perception is the reticular activating system, the RAS. The RAS functions as the mind's gatekeeper. It selects from everything that exists what is in resonance with what you believe, feel, or seek. Have you noticed that when you're thinking of a number, a word, or even a situation, it starts showing up everywhere? That's not magic, it's focus. It's the RAS adjusting the lens of your reality to match what you're vibrating internally. Now imagine that expanded into the quantum field, where everything is potential energy until it is observed. When your mind and vibration align with an intention, conscious or unconscious, you begin to collapse specific possibilities within the field. In other words, what you experience is not only a result of what you do, but of what you vibrate, observe, and feel. This is the turning point. Science shows that the brain is moldable. Spirituality shows that consciousness is creative. When these two truths meet, a quiet power is born. The power to reprogram reality through conscious observation. It's as if the universe is constantly waiting for a signal from you, a vibrational, emotional, energetic command. And when that command is clear, the response comes. It comes in the form of intuitions, of people who appear, of doors that open, of coincidences so specific they can't be ignored. These are synchronicities. And once again, the RAS comes into play. It doesn't just filter, it also confirms. When you notice a sign, you send a confirmation that that path is valid. The more you confirm, the more signs appear. But it's important to remember the RAS doesn't distinguish whether what you're focusing on is good or bad, whether it comes from the soul or from fear. It simply amplifies. That's why people stuck in scarcity patterns keep seeing scarcity. People vibrating abandonment continue attracting rejection. The universe doesn't punish, it responds. And maybe that's the greatest call of spiritual science, to understand that everything vibrates and everything responds. If this touched you in any way, I invite you to like this video now, not for the algorithm, but as an act of presence, as a I saw, I felt, I acknowledge. And in the comments, write this: my vibration is an invitation. These words are not just a pretty phrase. They are a reminder to your consciousness, a vibrational anchor. Because if reality responds to your vibration, then it also responds to your presence. And that brings us to the next question. Why do some people experience intense synchronicities, while others go through life without noticing a thing? The answer might lie in something simpler and deeper than you imagine. And in the next section, we'll enter that territory with the care and clarity it requires. Why some people experience synchronicities and others don't. Not every radio that's on is tuned in. This is one of the major keys to understanding why some people experience synchronicities frequently, while others continue along a straight, silent, and seemingly disconnected path. Synchronicity is not a spiritual privilege. It's a vibrational consequence. Everyone is immersed in the same field, in the same possibilities. What changes is the level of tuning. Imagine someone completely dominated by the rational mind, trapped in linear time, in control, in haste. That person might even cross paths with synchronicities, but won't see them. Not because they're not happening, but because their internal radio is out of frequency. A mind that constantly doubts, that demands proof, that needs guarantees before trusting, blocks the flow. And here comes a crucial point. Synchronicities are not evidence for the mind. They are responses for the soul. When you live on autopilot, vibrating anxiety, fear, or control, the reticular activating system, that same filter we talked about earlier, starts selecting only what resonates with that vibration. The world narrows, the invisible disappears. But when there is surrender, when there is presence, something expands. Perception becomes more subtle. Focus shifts from noise to symbol, from fear to meaning. That's why many people only begin to notice synchronicities after a crisis, a loss, an emotional breakdown, because in those moments the mind loses power, control shatters, and the soul begins to breathe. Pain, as difficult as it is, has the power to open us to the invisible. And when that happens, the signs begin to appear intensely, not because they never existed, but because now there is space for them to be recognized. There's also another determining factor, the state of the subconscious. The subconscious mind governs most of our perceptions and behaviors. It's like an invisible magnet that attracts experiences based on the patterns it holds. If those patterns are of scarcity, rejection, unworthiness, even the clearest signs will be ignored or distorted. It's as if the person were constantly saying to life without knowing, "I don't deserve answers." And the universe, with absolute neutrality, replies, "Okay." On the other hand, when you begin to reprogram the subconscious with presence, intention, and emotion, your frequency changes. And that's when unlikely encounters happen. The right words arrive, the paths reveal themselves, not as magic, but as a mirror. Trust also plays a deep role in this process. Trust is not believing that everything will work out. It's trusting that, even when everything seems confusing, reality is still guiding you. It's that trust that keeps the vibration open, that allows you to keep observing, even when the signs are not yet clear. And there's one more point that cannot be ignored: action. Synchronicity without action is like an open door you don't walk through. The universe can signal, point, confirm, but it won't walk for you. Synchronicity is a dance, and it only continues if you move. People who don't act on the signs they receive end up blocking the flow. Because life understands that you're not ready. That's why synchronicities don't persist in those who only observe but don't transform. They grow where there is movement, where there is active listening, where there is courage to change direction, even when the mind doesn't understand. So if you feel like you haven't been experiencing synchronicities, maybe the radio is off, or maybe you are listening but afraid to respond. In the next section, we'll dive deeper into this field and reveal how you can start identifying and decoding the signs that are already happening around you, but that you may not have learned to read yet. How to identify and decode synchronicities. Synchronicities don't shout, they whisper, and those who hear are those who've learned to be silent within. The first step in identifying a synchronicity is changing the way you move through the world. It's not about constantly looking for signs, but about walking with a special kind of presence, a state where you're attentive, but not anxious, receptive, but not desperate for answers. In this state, life begins to touch you in subtle, yet precise ways. Suddenly you think of someone and they show up. You're going through a deep doubt and hear a phrase on the street that seems to have been spoken just for you. You look at the clock and the same number repeats itself, like a persistent reminder. You open a random book and the first sentence answers a question you didn't even know you'd asked. These aren't random events. They are vibrational patterns collapsing into your reality because something within you resonates with them. And here comes the second step, feeling. More important than identifying the sign is noticing how it affects you. A true synchronicity causes a subtle chill, an internal stillness, a sense that something greater just happened, even if it makes no immediate sense. That reaction of the body and soul is what separates a simple coincidence from a real message. And to begin decoding these signs, You need a space where you can recognize them clearly. Internal silence and time to record. Keeping a synchronicity journal may seem simple, but it's one of the most powerful tools on this path. When you start writing down the signs you receive, you're telling the universe, "I'm listening." And the universe responds, "Then I'll keep speaking." At first it may seem confusing, but over time, patterns begin to appear. Repeating numbers, for example, aren't just pretty sequences. They carry energetic archetypes. 111 often indicates alignment with creative thoughts. 222 points to balance in partnerships. 444 speaks of spiritual protection. But more important than the generic meaning is what that number represents to you in that moment. Because synchronicity is symbolic language, and symbols don't have fixed meanings. They mold themselves to your consciousness. Other signs may appear through the repetition of visual symbols, animals, songs, words, or recurring dreams. Anything that repeats with emotional force carries a message. The question that should accompany every sign is, what was I feeling or thinking right before this happened? That question opens the door to decoding, because synchronicity is a bridge between the inner and outer worlds. It doesn't respond to loose thoughts, but to consistent vibrational states. So if you receive a sign, go inward. Observe your field at that moment. What emotion was pulsing? What decision did you need to make? What doubt was silently lingering? Sometimes the sign doesn't bring an answer, but a confirmation, and other times it's simply an invitation to pause, breathe, and return to presence. It's important to be careful not to turn everything into a sign. A mind anxious for answers begins to project meaning onto everything, and that can create more confusion than clarity. The key is in the vibration. When you're aligned, the right signs come with ease and coherence. They don't create agitation, they create silence. And the more you trust, the more the signs flow. Not because you're forcing, but because you're flowing. Identifying and decoding synchronicities is, above all, a process of listening. And listening in this context means feeling with maturity, presence, and surrender. It's knowing that not every sign will tell you what to do, but every right sign will remind you who you are. And now that you know how to read these silent codes, the question that remains is, how can you attract more synchronicities? How can you keep this channel open, constant, aligned? In the next section, we'll explore the essential triad that activates this flow: clear intention, vibrational alignment, and inspired action. 3 keys that, when combined, transform your life into an ongoing conversation with the universe. How to attract more synchronicities. Final triad. Attracting synchronicities is not a mental trick. It's a vibrational state, and that state doesn't arise from effort, but from coherence between what you feel, think, and do. The universe doesn't respond to your words, it responds to your frequency. And the most magnetic frequency there is one where there is clarity, openness, and movement. These 3 elements form a silent, but incredibly powerful triad, capable of transforming your reality into a stream of living responses. Everything begins with intention, but not just any intention. It takes more than a vague desire. The kind of intention that creates synchronicities is the one that comes from the soul, not the ego. It doesn't ask for outcomes, it emits direction. When you clearly define what you want to experience, and you do it without anxiety, you send a precise message to the field. You're not just thinking, you're directing energy. You're setting a meeting point with the universe. But intention alone is not enough. It needs fertile ground, and that ground is your vibrational state. Vibrational alignment means releasing internal resistance. It's not about being positive all the time, but about not fighting what you feel. Every resistance is tension in the field, and where there's tension, there's no flow. The vibration that attracts synchronicities is light yet steady, serene yet alive. It's when you can honestly say, I want this, but I trust the timing of the universe. This type of vibration is rare because it requires real surrender. And surrender only happens when there's presence, when you're no longer trying to control every detail, but living with awareness, openness, and acceptance. And then comes the third element, action. Action is the vibrational seal of intention. Many receive signs, intuitions, confirmations, but don't move. They wait for the universe to do everything on its own, not realizing that the universe can only act through you. Synchronicity is an invitation, but it's you who walks through the door, and that crossing needs to happen in the physical world. A phone call you feel you should make, a path that seems small but vibrates right, a yes that comes from the body, even if the mind is afraid. When you act in alignment with the signs, life understands that you're ready, and it starts accelerating the encounters. It's as if the universe says, "He got it, she trusted." So let's keep sending more. This triad, clear intention, vibrational alignment, and inspired action, not only attracts synchronicities, it creates a new way of being in the world. A way where you no longer try to force the path, but recognize it. Where you no longer feel alone, because you realize that reality is always in dialogue with you. And with each response that comes, something within you strengthens. You stop doubting your own intuition. You begin to trust your own steps. And over time, something shifts. Life ceases to be a sequence of disconnected events. It becomes narrative, rhythm, presence, and you cease to be merely the observer. You become the co-creator. Perhaps that is the true power of synchronicities. Not to prove that the universe is magical, but to remind you that you are part of it. And when your vibration is aligned, when your intention is honest, and when your action is coherent, the entire universe delicately conspires to guide you. Not through the obvious, but through the subtle. Not through force, but through precision. And when you least expect it, you realize you're no longer looking for signs. You've become the sign itself. We've reached the end of our journey, and perhaps now you realize that synchronicities were never isolated accidents, but fragments of a constant dialogue between you and existence itself. It was never about external signs, but about internal remembrance. Remembrance that reality is responsive, that the invisible is always present, and that life, when lived with presence, reveals itself as a mirror of your most intimate frequency. You no longer need to chase the answers. They are already finding you. All it takes is a willingness to listen and to act with an aligned heart. If this touched you in any way, write in the comments, "I heard the call." That way I'll know you made it here, present, whole, awake.